I've been known to dabble in some words, maybe an adjective here or there if I'm feeling frisky. See what I did there? Despite being such a crucial pillar of society, languages can't be objectively defined like maths and science. Instead, languages function off a very different metric: vibes. There are different letters that make up an alphabet, different alphabets for different languages, letters that are pronounced differently depending on the language, rules that must be followed about spelling and pronunciation that are unique to each language, except for all the times that they aren't. Slang words aren't real words, except slang is slang for slang and is a real word. Acronyms aren't real words, except for when they are, and Russian cursive. But all the different forms of language were created for the same purpose: to help people communicate. And whenever they wanted to say something that they didn't have a suitable word for, they would just make up a new one. Countless people have done this throughout history, but the most notorious one is William Shakespeare. What's the word for a silly little guy? Oh, whatever. Zany. Thou art a zany fellow. Zany? It means a silly little guy. Oh, zany. Haha! Yep, Shakespeare is credited with inventing over 1,700 English words. But oh yeah, sure, I'll bet it was really difficult for him to invent so many words when pretty much only the noble folk knew how to read or write at the time. I mean, Shakespeare's target audience were the commoners of the 16th century and not the upper classes. So instead of making up brand new words, wouldn't it make more sense for him to simply write the words that he heard them already using? I'm not saying he didn't invent any new words himself, but come on, just look at some of these words. Eyeball, bedroom, alligator. How could he have... I feel like I'm going mad. Anyway. Regardless of whether Shakespeare invented all those words or was simply the first one to write them down, by using them in his plays, he secured his spot as one of the most integral players in shaping modern English. Because as his plays garnered recognition from the upper classes, they were suddenly exposed to all these new words in a form that they respected, and so they likely chose to acknowledge them as real words as a result. And if you find it strange to imagine a bunch of 16th century peasants slinging thou and dust around in conversation, keep in mind that their accent at the time was pretty close to a modern day American hillbilly. So hopefully, that starts to paint a clearer picture for thou. I'm so sorry. But having new words declared real because they were relevant to pop culture is actually quite similar to how it's still done today. However, for a word to be put in the dictionary, it does need to satisfy a few specific criteria. Popularity is undoubtedly the most important factor, but if that were the only thing that was considered, then there would be nothing stopping any pop culture slang from making the jump between the Urban Dictionary over to the regular one. No. In general, there are 4 main points that are considered when deciding if a word should be added to the dictionary. All proposed words are assessed on their popularity, consistency of definition and use, their perceived longevity, and their usefulness. But if all real words need to be popular and useful, then how come there are so many obscure words in the dictionary? Like defenestration, to throw someone out of a window. Bumfuzzle, to confuse or fluster. Or obsquatulate, to leave abruptly. Yeah, because I'm always saying stuff like, he left her bumfuzzled by suddenly obsquatulating by self-defenestration. It was at this point that I decided to do a little digging into each of these words and... okay. Yeah, no, Yeah, okay, I guess that makes sense. Since languages grow and change over time, many of the words that seem irrelevant to us now were likely, once upon a time, exactly what society needed. But with languages, like with all things, eventually we move on to something new and leave the past behind. But their memory lives on in the dictionary, because for as hard as it is to add a new word to the dictionary, it is infinitely more difficult to take one out, since doing so could mean erasing useful tools for understanding historical records. It's kind of like how a lot of infrastructure around the world is actually built upon Microsoft Excel files from the 90s. So Microsoft makes all their updates compatible with older versions, because if they don't, let's just say, we'll notice. What? Speaking of technology, as it advances and the world becomes more connected, we learn more things about other countries, and sometimes we even adopt bits of their languages into our own. French gives us words like champagne and restaurant. Japanese gives us words like tsunami and karaoke. And Dutch gives us the answer to the question, what if someone tried to combine English and German while actively fighting anesthesia? Winkelwagen, skiltpad, telefoon, hondenflokkel. Yeah. People will naturally pick up changes in communication really quickly. For example, have you ever caught yourself suddenly using a new word just because a person you frequently spend time with uses it a lot? And since we're spending more and more time in front of a screen, wouldn't it be possible to pick up new habits from the things that we watch? Shakespeare has actually already proved that this is possible, but I've discovered that some of the most influential sources appear to be cartoons. So here are some of the most impressive ones that I found. What do you think about when I bring up Bugs Bunny? Do you imagine him taunting Elmer Fudd? Or perhaps eating a carrot? But why do you imagine him eating a carrot? Because he's a rabbit? I hear you say foolishly, for you are a fool saying foolish things. I cast Fireball! No, you fool. Rabbits are associated with carrots because of Bugs Bunny. Well, technically, it's because of this guy. This is Clark Gable. He was a prolific actor from the 1930s, most famous for his role in a 1934 film called It Happened One Night. Now, why don't we just have a quick little squiz at his movie poster for a moment? Oh? What's that? Is that a carrot? This moment of Bugs Bunny eating a carrot was a reference to Clark Gable. But as time went on, Bugs Bunny's popularity grew while Clark's shrank, and now we associate carrots with rabbits in general. While we're on the topic of Looney Tunes, Daffy Duck has a similar legacy. In a film from 1940, Daffy mocks Elmer Fudd by calling him "my little Nimrod." But Nimrod didn't mean fool or idiot. In fact, the word Nimrod actually comes from the first book of the Bible, being the name given to a great and fearsome hunter. So Daffy Duck was calling Elmer Fudd a Nimrod like you would call someone with chronic smooth brain an Einstein. Oi! I also wanted to see if any other writers followed in Shakespeare's footsteps, creating or popularizing specific words, and I stumbled upon Dr. Seuss. He's credited with creating over 65 original words, and although most of them didn't make it into the dictionary because they were borderline nonsense, like hackencracks or Beppo no bungus, he did manage to strike gold a few times with words like nerd and oobleck. Hey, so knowing all of this, would it be possible to make a prediction about what words might make it into the dictionary next? Well, if you read the title of this video, then I'm sure you know where I'm going with this. I am going to predict that DM Archive will get the word profane added to the dictionary within the next few years. Before we go further, if you're unfamiliar with profane, then I encourage you to take just 20 seconds to click the link at the top of the description to get caught up. We good? Okay, moving on. Firstly, let's take a closer look at the circumstances around profane, and I'll show you why it stands out to me as such a strong contender. Profane is fresh, but it's familiar. The gotcha-style pun of ibuprofen is a timeless classic, harkening back to the days of Ligma and Bofa. And since it's latched itself onto a commonly used word like ibuprofen, it has the potential to stay relevant for much longer. Profane also plays off the term gooning, which is derived from the word goon, as it is thought to have the effect of turning someone stupid, like a goon. Having such a strong association with two pre-existing words like these does wonders for its potential longevity. Although the word goon isn't as commonly used as ibuprofen, I discovered that it actually has roots as far back as the 1500s. Apparently, goni, as it was called back then, was originally coined by sailors as a name for large, clumsy birds like albatross. And although the spelling and definition have changed slightly between then and now, it's no small feat that it has stuck around for so long. In fact, it's a little bit strange, don't you think? I mean, it comes from the same time as Shakespeare, and the English language as a whole has changed so much since then. So how was it that this random word that was only used by a select group of people has survived for centuries? I mean, Bugs and Daffy were able to make their mark because of their immense popularity, but it's not like there was a cartoon sailor that could rival the cultural significance of these icons, right? Popeye the Sailor Man was an immensely popular comic turned cartoon, first appearing on the big screen in 1933, several years before either Bugs or Daffy were even around. Of course, Popeye would use the term goon because the word belonged to sailors. So if it's thanks to Popeye that DM Archive was even able to create Profan in the first place, the idea that it could one day find a home in the dictionary alongside its namesake is not only possible, but kind of poetic. Although it is worth mentioning that words with mature connotations usually have a harder time being recognized as real words. Yeah, there's no way they'd add a word like that to the dictionary. I'm sorry. But yet again, it wouldn't be the first time that it has happened. Look at the word raw dogging. It got popular from a trend of people saying they raw dogged a flight by just sitting in their seat and staring straight ahead the whole time. It even made it on the news. And now it's made its way into the dictionary as a general term for doing an activity without anything to make it easier or to help pass the time. So sometimes a word or phrase with mature connotations will be used in another context, and eventually the original meaning becomes just a faint memory. But for some reason, I just can't seem to think of any other occasions where someone might have repurposed a word or concept only for the new definition to become more popular. Oh well. Maybe the spelling or definition of profan will change once or twice in the coming years, but it seems to tick all the right boxes needed to land DM Archive in the Language Hall of Fame, right alongside Shakespeare. You might think it's a stretch to put them together, but I would like to remind you that Shakespeare is credited with writing the very first Yo Mama joke. So I'm pretty sure that if he were alive today, he would be a great internet shitposter. And personally, I think that Shakespeare would be proud to stand alongside someone like DM Archive. Oh. I might not be the wordsmith that DM Archive is, but I would like to propose my own word. Cringulation. It's the sensation you feel when you're showing someone a funny video, but then you slowly realize that they don't find it funny and you can't just stop halfway through, so you just have to stay there while neither of you is having a good time and you both just die a little bit inside. But nobody would ever feel that way about one of my videos, right? What if I say bungus again? Uh-oh.